You know what I love about Fallout 4? It's that you can spend 60 odd hours carefully planning a balanced, roleplay accurate, immersive build, or you can pick a handful of specific perks and turn the entire Commonwealth into a minor inconvenience. And today, I'm going down the second route. I'd like to clarify this isn't a top 20 perks video, and it's not a play how you want video. Instead, this is the most overpowered perks in every special, and the rules for this video are simple. If you had to pick one perk per category for an overpowered build, which helps with pure damage and maximum nonsense, which one would it be? These are perks that should delete legendary enemies before they mutate, turn survival encounters into target practice, and make Deathclaws feel like mildly aggressive lizards. Yes, some of these may be obvious, some are almost certainly controversial, and at least one of them is probably not the one you think it is. So if you've ever wondered, what is the one perk I absolutely shouldn't skip to become overpowered, then it should be in this list. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get stuck in. Alright, let's start with strength, and this is probably the category that most players would associate with big weapons, big swings, and solving any problems they face by hitting them repeatedly. Now, some of you may be thinking that the obvious pick here are perks like Leagues or Heavy Gunner because these give you more damage with big weapons. Very exciting, very subtle, but also pretty damn predictable. And we're not here for predictable. We're here for quietly broken, and with that being said, I would probably say the most overpowered strength perk is in fact Rooted. Now I get it, on paper, Rooted doesn't sound insane because it gives you bonus damage and damage resistance while standing still. Cool. But in Fallout 4, you stand still quite a lot, more than you actually probably think you do. Every time you enter VATS, swing a melee weapon, charge a power attack, or panic because a Deathclaw is just screaming in your face, then you are probably technically stationary. At max rank, Rooted gives you 50% melee damage, significant damage resistance, and immunity to stagger at higher levels, and that's not really in the nice bonus territory. That is more, why is this allowed territory. Now, if you combine Rooted with Blitz, Big Leagues, Critical Bank, or even just basic VAT spam, then suddenly you're teleporting across rooms doing boosted damage with bonus resistance every single time. You're not trading blows anymore, you're conducting an execution. And the best part, it doesn't require you being in power armor either. It also doesn't require you to use a specific weapon type or consume some complicated chem stack. It just kind of works. Stand still and win the fight. That's the perk. Now, a good backup for the strength category, specifically if you're running a pure heavy gun build, is obviously Heavy Gunner, and that can be pretty damn insane as well. Though, as I said, that's a bit more build dependent, whereas Rooted is universally chaotic. And this is just the very first item on the special, and it probably gets worse from here. Alright, let's move on to Perception, which is one that may sound tactical and precise, but in reality, you could call it the things go boom tree. Now, a lot of players think Perception is about VATS accuracy, and yes, high Perception does help you hit things with a higher degree of accuracy, but we're not here to hit things more accurately, we are here to delete zip codes, and that means the most overpowered Perception perk is Demolition Expert. And this one is definitely not subtle because right from rank 1 you're increasing explosive damage, and by max rank you are turning every explosive weapon in the game into a small scale war crime. So here's why this perk is pretty overpowered. It doesn't just affect frag grenades, mines and missile launchers, it also affects explosive legendary weapons, which means something like, I think this spray and pray suddenly becomes a fully automatic area of effect damage, because every bullet explodes and every explosion scales, every enemy nearby probably regrets existing, and because Fallout 4's explosive damage can double dip on certain resistances and hit multiple body parts, you're not just doing damage anymore, you're doing spreadsheet breaking damage. Now, if you add dense armor mods, mainly so you don't delete yourself at the same time, grenade spamming VATs, choke points, and interior spaces, then you can wipe entire rooms before the AI even finishes standing up. And at this point, it's almost not combat, it's more pest control. Now, if you're not really an explosive enjoyer, or you perhaps prefer to keep yourself alive, then there's a very strong backup for Perception, and that is Penetrator. And the Penetrator perks lets you target enemies through covering VATs, walls, railings, that thin sheet of metal they're hiding behind. That is now basically irrelevant. And while the damage is slightly reduced, obviously, the positional advantage is pretty damn good, because enemies don't expect you to shoot them through the architecture, because normally you can't. Now, Penetrator can turn defensive fights into point-and-click adventures. Is it as flashy as Demolition Expert? No. Is it as morally questionable? Also no. But if you're running a VATS-heavy build, especially with high luck and crit stacking, then Penetrator lets you remove the most annoying part of firefighting: waiting. So if strength was stand still and win fights, then perception is remove the concept of safety and make things go boom. Now, we are just getting started, so next up is endurance, which is less about killing faster and more about not dying while you're doing it. Endurance is one that a lot of people seem to underestimate, right up until the point where they're crawling away from a fight with 2 broken legs and 3 HP. Now, the problem with endurance in a raw damage video like this one is it's not flashy, it definitely doesn't say plus 100% damage, it doesn't let you teleport across rooms and just about keeps you alive. Which sounds kind of boring in all honesty, but that is until you realise something very important. If you're dead, you're dealing 0 damage. Obviously. So for endurance, the most overpowered perk for raw power is probably Chem resistance. Now, hear me out. Most people treat chems like, oh, I'll save these for a big fight, and then they finish the game with 37 Psycho, 19 Jet, and what can only be described as a small pharmacy in their inventory. Chem resistance removes the only downside that stops you from abusing chems constantly: addiction. No addiction means no debuffs, no maintenance, no guilt, and ultimately no consequences. Now suddenly Psycho means permanent 25% damage, Jet is your personal slow motion button, Psycho Jet effectively turns everything into a cinematic massacre, and buff tats mean extra survivability and damage. And don't forget that because chems stack, you can turn every hard encounter into a boss intro cutscene, basically. Now, obviously, chem resistant doesn't increase your damage directly, but instead it can remove the limiter, and that's arguably a little bit more broken. Once you stop rationing chems, the entire combat loop changes, so you're not surviving fights anymore. You're basically scheduling them. Now, if you're thinking, I don't want to be a walking chem experiment making questionable life choices, which is totally fair, I have included a backup endurance perk, and this one is Adamantium Skeleton. Now, something people somehow forget: broken limbs are a massive damage loss, basically. Broken arms means worse accuracy, broken legs means slower movement, crippled head means blurred vision, getting staggered constantly is missed attacks. So Adamantium Skeleton sort of removes that. In fact, if you're fully maxed out, it does. So that means no limb damage, no random cripples mid-fight, and no dramatic limping while Super Mutant winds up a baseball bat. It's not a flashy perk by any stretch of the imagination, but it can smooth combat out so much that your damage output becomes consistent, and consistency often means power. So while strength and perception were about blowing things up, endurance is about removing the brakes from that aggression. Next up is charisma, the stat that makes people like you, or more accurately, the stat that determines whether you travel with a companion or embrace your inner antisocial warlord. Now, there are some solid perks in charisma, like Cap Collector, which is fairly decent, Local Leader, which is incredibly useful as it gives you supply lines, and Inspirational, which is good if you love companions walking directly into your line of fire. But if we're talking about raw power, then there's only one correct answer, I think, and that is Lone Wanderer. Honestly, this perk is great. At rank 1, you get 15% damage reduction, plus 50 carry weight, which is already good. But at higher ranks, well, then you're getting 25% damage dealt, 30% damage resistance, even more carry weight, and for doing what exactly? Having no friends. That's it. That's the only condition. And the best part is, dog meat doesn't actually count, so you can still bring the good boy with you and get the distraction, the enemy stagger, and the occasional heroic tackle, while still benefiting from Lone Wanderer's full bonuses. So with Lone Wanderer, what you're effectively getting is free damage, free survivability, free carry weight, and seemingly no downsides. It's kind of like 3 perks stapled together, and because it still scales with literally any build, so melee, explosive, sniper, power armor, unhinged chem enjoyer, it just works. The only cost really is missing companion dialogue, which, let's be honest, you've probably heard 47 times already. Now, if you absolutely refuse to travel alone, then my backup pick is actually probably inspirational. At higher ranks, companions can't hurt you. You deal more damage while traveling with them, they deal more damage, and they gain more health, which solves one problem in Fallout 4, and that is, why is Piper shooting me in the back of the head? Inspirational turns companions from a liability into actual contributors. Now, is it stronger than Lone Wanderer? No, absolutely not, because Lone Wanderer is just mathematically better. If your build relies on companion perks like Deacon's Stealth Bonus or Dance's Laser Synergy, then Inspirational will keep things smoother. So if Endurance removes consequences, Charisma removes the need for other humans, or synths. Alright, let's get stuck into Intelligence. To start, people usually level for XP gain, crafting, science, and generally just feeling responsible. But we're not here for being responsible, we are here to weaponize poor life choices. Now, there are some strong perks in here. Gun Nut is very practical. Science is essential for energy builds. Chemist can be absolutely unhinged if you're into it and pair it with Chem Resistance. But if we're talking raw, dramatic, screen-shaking power, then there is only one winner. Nerd Rage. And this perk is theatrical, so when your health drops below 20%, Nerd Rage triggers the slowing down of time. You'll gain bonus damage, and you'll also gain damage resistance. It's almost like Fallout 4's version of, oh, you thought you were winning this fight, because it does reward aggressive play. It rewards risk, and if you're already stacking Lone Wanderer, Rooted, Chem Boost, and damage perks, then Nerd Rage doesn't just save you, it kind of pushes you over the edge. You dip into low health, time slows down, you one-shot the thing that almost killed you, and suddenly you look intentional. In short, it turns mistakes into cinematic comebacks. Now, if you combine that with high-luck crit builds, Blitz melee, or even power armor tank builds, then it becomes, well, this clutch damage spike that triggers constantly in chaotic fights. And in time, you'll stop fearing low health, and in some cases, you might actually start chasing it, which is a dangerous mindset, but kind of effective one if you've got Nerd Rage. Now, if you prefer consistent dominance instead of dramatic anime power-ups, then my backup intelligence pick is probably Chemist. Chemist doubles and eventually triples Chem duration, which means Psycho Jet, Buff Tats, and everything else lasts longer, and suddenly your temporary buffs feel almost permanent. Chemist puts plus Chem resistance, well, at that point you're almost not a person, instead you're just a walking pharmaceutical event. The only reason this isn't the main pick is because it's more setup heavy, whereas Nerd Rage activates automatically. Chemist requires a little bit of planning, but in a min-max environment, Chemist might actually scale a little bit harder over time, so intelligence isn't just about crafting laser rifles, it's about either turning low health into damage phase, or turning your character into a legally questionable chemistry experiment. And then next up is agility, which is where things get a little bit even more ridiculous. So agility is the stat responsible for things like action points, stealth, VATS usage, and turning melee into teleportation. There are a lot of strong perks here. Sneak, that much is obvious. Ninja, which has disgusting damage scaling for sneak and melee attacks. Action Boy and Action Girl are usually solid picks. Gun Fu, which can be stylish and dangerous, but if we're talking truly overpowered, not strong, not efficient, overpowered, then there really is one answer. Blitz. Blitz is not balanced, it is not subtle, nor is it respectful of encounter design. And for those of you who haven't abused it so far, Blitz increases your melee VATS range, and at rank 2, you can get VATS enemies from absurd distances, like why did I just teleport across the room distances? So here's why this is a bit broken. You close that distance instantly, you gain VATS damage multipliers, you trigger things like Rooted, which while technically standing still, and you avoid most incoming fire because you're in VATS. So instead of running towards enemies and getting shot on the way hoping you survive the approach, you just sort of appear out of nowhere. It turns meleeing from high risk into why are they even trying? And once you combine Blitz with maybe Ninja, Big Leagues, Critical Banker, and Rooted, you don't fight rooms, you clear them in a sequence of cinematic jump cuts. Enemy at the back of the room? Doesn't matter. Second floor balcony? Irrelevant. Blitz basically says geography is optional, and that's kind of why it wins. But if you prefer deleting enemies before combat technically begins, then my backup pick here is Ninja. Ninja boosts sneak attack damage, and at higher ranks this multiplier is kind of absurd. I'd say you should just stack Ninja with Sneak, Suppressed Weapons, Mr. Sandman, and High Perception or Luck builds, so you can one-shot enemies that technically shouldn't be one-shot. The reason Ninja isn't the main pick is it often requires stealth positioning, whereas Blitz just works mid-chaos. It also works when things go wrong, and it works when you've completely abandoned subtlety. Ninja is surgical, Blitz is theatrical, so agility isn't just about sneaking, it's about deciding whether enemies deserve a quiet deletion or a teleporting execution. Alright, the final one is Luck, which is a stat that makes you feel like the universe probably owes you something. A lot of players treat Luck like extra crits, some passive nonsense, or a backup stat if nothing else looks good. And that's wrong. If agility was teleporting into chaos, Luck is making chaos obey you, so I would say the most overpowered Luck perk, probably Critical Banker. Yes, Critical Banker. And here's why this one breaks the game. You can store multiple critical hits in VATs, and you can unleash them at the exact moment you want to. If you combine this with high damage weapons, enemies don't stand a chance. Like we're talking Death Claws deleted before they roar, legendary enemies evaporating mid-screen, any boss fights turning into a cinematic oops, I win moment, and because you control exactly when to trigger the crits, timing is now cheating. This perk turns you from participant into Punisher of the Commonwealth. But if for some reason you don't want to micromanage your store crits, then the backup is probably better criticals. At max rank, every critical does 50% more damage. Every crit feels like a hammer smashing reality, so you don't need to think about storing or triggering them, it just happens. It is simpler, can be more reliable, and works with builds that aren't VATS heavy, but I would say Critical Banker wins on raw control, chaos factor, and that I decide who lives energy. Alright, let's take a moment and just appreciate what we've done. We kind of went full Fallout 4 unhinged mode, and every special stat got the treatment it deserves. So here's the summary. Strength, rooted, so stand still and suddenly you're a walking wall of damage. Death Claws, more likely politely relieving the area. Perception, demolition expert, explosions so big they make Fat Man players feel underwhelmed. Optional backup, penetrator, shoot through the walls like a tactical ghost. Endurance, chem resistance, so all the chems, none of the addiction, and you're now the wasteland's walking pharmacy. The backup of adamantium skeleton, so no limb damage and no excuses. Charisma is lone wanderer, so companions are optional, bonuses are mandatory. Damage, survivability, carry weight are all free bonuses, just like your feelings about Preston's quests. Backup, inspirational, keep companions alive while still being broken. Intelligence is nerd rage, low health, perfect. Time slows, damage skyrockets, cinematic, lethal, and dramatic, just like your Fallout 4 experience should be. And a backup, chemist, your personal chemical war zone. Agility, Blitz, teleport across the battlefield and one-shot enemies mid-VATs. The Commonwealth has no safe distance anymore, and a backup of Ninja, so you can stealthily, surgically cause chaos for the planners among us. And finally, Luck, Critical Banker. The universe owes you nothing except maybe a dozen stored crits, ready to delete anyone in sight. Backup, better criticals, more damage, less fuss. And what does all of that give us? Maximum damage, minimum patience required, and the entire game encounters now feel like a PowerPoint presentation of how to delete things efficiently. These perks aren't just good, they're absurd and mathematically mischievous. They are the kind of things that Bethesda quietly whispers about while crossing their fingers that players don't stack them all at once. So remember, if you want to feel like a god amongst raiders, deathclaws, and unluckily spawned super mutants, then this is your roadmap. If you combined all of these, congratulations, you're turning Fallout 4 from a survival game into a casual destruction simulator. So there you have it, folks. 7 special categories, 7 perks, and 7 ways you can completely ignore Bethesda's carefully balanced combat design. I would say if you're even running maybe 4 of these together, congratulations, you're no longer surviving the wasteland. You are now effectively auditing it. Now, obviously, this video was like the raw power version of perks, but if you're the kind of player who enjoys hunger, dehydration, sleeping in a sleeping bag next to a feral ghoul, then don't worry, because the survival-focused version is coming soon to my channel. But I am curious, which perk do you think is actually the most broken, and which one did I get completely wrong? Because I'd be incredibly surprised if you agreed with all of this list. Let me know in the comments. I fully expect to be yelled at about luck. But anyway, if you enjoyed this video and if you're still here, it would be totally awesome if you could support my channel by hitting those like and subscribe buttons. You can now become a channel member as well, and as always, thank you for watching this video, and I hope to catch you in my next one.